Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you.
Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. I wanted to be on schedule today, so I am recording, but I have a slight frog in my throat because I am just getting over a little cold. That's how it is in New York in the winters, so I have to accept it, but my voice is not as smooth as usual, so I apologize for that. This is going to be a two-part episode on AIart, but I want to preface it because the next episode I'm inviting a friend on who is a great artist and an all-around interesting individual. His name is G. Romero, and he'll be on, and we'll be having a conversation on AIart and its implications. But I want to kind of give you a background as to what art means to me. And before I head into that, I want to share with you an art exhibit I actually attended yesterday, which was in Woodstock. And the crazy thing is, like, I am, I guess, a hippie chick, okay? I've never been to Woodstock, and it's only an hour and a half from me. So to enter that little town and to see, you know, what it offers, it's really cool. I'm looking forward to heading back there in the spring and just, you know, wandering around because it's fabulous. It's kind of contained all of this energy and charisma and quaintness and artistic expression and spirit as I'm sure it had many years back. So I'm looking forward to heading back up there. That area contains a lot of history. And a teacher of mine, a shamanic teacher of mine, Evan Pritchard, I had met many years ago, pre-COVID, and was attending his, I guess, indigenous wisdom seminars and offerings and classes. And I often would see him at the Wainwright House in Rye, which is a center that offers multifaceted programs, events, classes to enhance your potential. So they have all different kinds of things there, from meditation to qigong to yoga to all kinds of fun artistic workshops. And I've taken a bunch of classes with him on the medicine wheel, on the elements of nature. After COVID, he ended up creating this forum or this workshop schedule called Natural State University. You know, it was great because we were able to all get together during a time when everyone was antisocial and really just connect in this very spiritual and sacred space online, but in a shared time and energy. So it was a great thing. And so I've been really studying with him since. And these last few months have just been so busy. So I was thrilled to see that he was going to give an art talk on this subject matter. What I found is that there's a whole language that's missing, right? There's a whole language that we did not inherit, we did not learn about as kids in this American nation. And he has strove to try to pass those traditions on. And I really admire that because I've learned a great deal. And also I was able to share my experiences with someone who sees those things as real. And, you know, like for instance, and I actually recorded this in my book, one time I ended up getting like lost in the Rocky Mountains. And I really had to call upon, I guess, some kind of spirit animal to help me get out before sundown. And, you know, I was cawing and I was flapping my wings like a bird. I kind of went into some bird energy. And then I listened for the sound of running water. And it led me out of the woods. And, you know, it took hours. But it was the only trusting sound that I was able to connect with. And there was definitely like nature was guiding me out of its bosom. And when I shared him with that, he was like, oh yeah, of course, like A, B, C, D, F, G, you know, like he knew exactly what that experience was and why it happened and, you know, what it provided for me and that it was real. And so it was such a beautiful thing because I said, oh gosh, like, look, you know, there is a world out there that I have not come across. And yet, you know, it's means so much more than, say, what at the time, Western medicine was trying to tell me was real, right? All their interpretations of everything. So there's a great deal of things that have been not passed down and lost. And I bring this up having to do with AIart because the AI engine is only as good as what is input into it. And they have already found that a lot of AI systems are racist, are biased, and that has to do with the data sets that are available to it. So the Woodstock Artists Association and Museum held this art exhibit. It's called Restoring Indigenous Voices, Landscapes from the Permanent Collection, exploring Woodstock's Native American history, which explores the historical context of a selection of landscapes, well-known mountains, rivers, fields, and sites in that region. 20 works were on view, paintings, photographs, prints. A lot of works of that region focus on the well-known locations, such as the Ashakin Reservoir, Overlook Mountain, Cooper Lake, Indian Head Mountain, the Hudson River, Catskills. So Evan's a descendant of the Micmac people, which is part of the Algonquin nations. And he's also the founder of the Center for Algonquin Culture. And he held a great exhibit talking about each painting and really, you know, where these things are physically. Evan's an incredible researcher of Native American geography. And he is a descendant of the Miramichi branch of the Micmac Nation. And as I sat there and listened to all of this interesting history, Evan mentioned that one of the paintings created by Judy Abbott took 3 years. And, you know, painting is a lot different from photography. It can take up from 6 hours to 3 years, depending on, you know, what medium you're using, how you're approaching it. So the experience of painting it and giving it then to others is a way for them to really know what that is on a deeper level. So this idea of the human voices through the painting, of delivering a visual art message to others, is a way to preserve it in a very unique way. And, you know, I think it's important when we talk about Indigenous narratives that we make that connection, because what's going on now with AI in how they are kind of plunging into the art world and possibly disrupting all of the future jobs of the art industry reminds me very much about, you know, the philosophy, right, that this idea of colonialism brought into these lands. This idea of, well, progress is inevitable. You have to keep up with it. Whoever stands in the way and can't adapt will not be part of the next generation of success, of prosperity. And their groups put aside. You only remember these things when you give time to preserving those narratives. And what was clear was that when everyone was going through each painting, these paintings were made later, not as though that these were not paintings from the era, right, of when the natives were on these lands. They were created later on. And so there's an effort now to try to encapsulate what that snapshot is. Who was there during that snapshot? What life and what were the inhabitants doing in their lifestyles in the snapshot of those lands? And that's what everyone was there to share. But one of the things that he also noticed was that, he had to do extensive research. This stuff was not easy to find. A lot of this stuff is not in books or even on the internet. So a lot of it is through stories, through oral tradition, wisdom, other things that he'd have to put together to find this historical significance from all different sources. So when we're talking about what's preserved and what's moving forward in the AI language, which is now going to be the future language of art, what's going to be left out? What's going to be the most important thing? What's going to be the thing that's most popular? What's going to be the narrative that's preserved? Is there a chance to learn how to go back in time and preserve the stories? With this AI systems coming about, it's going to change fundamentally how art is done, how art is seen, how art is understood, and what art is. Because art right now, to me, encapsulates a message of what the artist was trying to convey and what that artist saw through his own eyes. And so that's a uniquely human thing, and what they were able to then communicate through their hands. This is now fundamentally changed. And there is an embracing of this on a grand scale from many non-artists, but also many artists. And I'd like to segue now into the AI art explosion and just give a background of where it's coming from, where it's going, where it is now, and what that means in terms of what is it to create art? What is it to be an artist? I'm going to share my own personal story. I knew early on that I had some kind of interest/talent in art. I just always wanted to do this stuff at home, not in the classroom so much. My art program wasn't so great in this Catholic school where, there was like a push-in art teacher, and half the times they were there, half the times they weren't. The art education wasn't highly established, or the curriculum wasn't comprehensive. But somewhere along the line, the art teacher that I had noticed that I did have a talent, and that happened around 6th grade. So at that point, I took some interest in it, and by high school, I realized that I wanted to pursue it more, which led to me throughout high school really working on my portfolio so that I could get into a college for an art program. I ended up studying art and English because I wanted to also be a writer. But studying art was such a thrill for me because it was like a chance to, I guess, connect with who were the artists of the past. What were they creating? Why were they creating it? And it was, I guess, my mission, I guess it's the mission of all artists when they start out, is what are you going to speak about? What is your style, and how are you going to convey your reality? So you learn other people's styles in order to do that. You have to learn from the best. And as an art educator right now, that's what I do also. That's part of learning about art, seeing what the best people do, how they process the work and how they create the work, and distill it down into principles of understanding, of visual elements, and how do they convey it. So the way to learn is to learn from the art of today. Okay, and of the past. That is how you learn about how to create art, no doubt. References are something I am always encouraging my students to look at because that helps trigger, in your mind and imagine it, kind of like a catalyst for an imaginative, exploration, right? It's a beginning point. So, and I'm going to get back to this because there's a lot of people who are saying, well, AI art is just basically the computer doing what humans do, which is humans take art and they sample a bunch of things and then they put it together as their own style. So everything's copied anyway and it's not realistic. Well, people who say that aren't artists. Maybe artists, there are artists who do use that as an example, but primarily when you do that as an artist, it takes time. And I'm going to refer to this idea of time again and again because it is my fundamental point with this particular podcast. What we are eliminating is the process.
And that's the saddest thing to me personally, because after college, I pursued my artistic expression a little bit. I had a few shows. I was very well received, even in New York City. And then I went away to India. And when I had come back, and, my last episode, if you haven't listened, I started a new life. Basically, for the following 10 years, my artistic ability that I had worked so hard at getting a degree at was obliterated on antipsychotics that I was forced upon. As much as I wanted to get off them and pursue my art, I didn't have the ability to do that anymore. The area of the brain that these drugs targeted exactly the creative area, so that I could no longer paint. I could no longer access this idea of visualizing something in my brain and then knowing, like accessing all of the course load of skill work that I had that I had accumulated in as an undergraduate. I could no longer do that. It was almost as if I never even took a class in art. I could no longer do that. That's how aggressive those drugs were. So when I finally started shifting and pushing to update meds and change meds, I found a few alternatives that helped me somehow break into that creative space again, understand it, when that happened, a world opened up to me again, which was really the soul of my being, right? My DNA was then, I could get in touch with that again. I was born with that. So I lost the ability to do art during those days. It was almost a decade of my life that I lived a life as an artist unable to do art. Now, a lot of people who have enjoyed the comfort of working, say, in the design fields, whether it be graphic arts or any kind of digital art medium, so far that has been, pretty much since I went to school, got my degree in the early 1990s to today, they've enjoyed wonderful careers in the arts. I didn't go into commercial art. I went into fine art, and I was pulled more into that area. As a prediction, I would definitely, as a teacher now, I'm going to encourage my kids not to worry about the graphic art concepts, but more because now anybody's going to be able to do it. And if everybody can do it, that's great, because as the developer of Stable Diffusion says, and we'll get into him and his views, which are actually very enlightening, I will admit, it's about democratizing, right? So that people in India have the same opportunities as people in America, not just those who go to art school. I get it. I totally understand it. In fact, the idea of even an immigrant person like me, my family, getting the opportunity to do things like create art, it's a very luxurious thing. Like, my family worked very, very hard as, blue collar workers. So for me to have that experience, it was almost like I was transported into another class, right? This idea of just being able to do art. That was only something that the people who had money or support of people who had money, sponsorship, could do something like that. So is it going to shake things up and democratize the world so that more people have this opportunity to be creative? I understand that concept. So we'll return to that. But let me just give you the lowdown, okay? The background, the general idea about what AIart is. So basically, it started out with Dali and then Dali 2. Now, Dali is like, kind of a take on Salvador Dali and Wall-E, the 2008 American computer animated science fiction film produced by Pixar and released by Walt Disney. So yeah, it's a little play on things. It's like, okay, let's get into this space and create stuff. Again, it is a system that creates realistic images and art from a description in natural language, okay? So a person using it can create original realistic images and art from a text description, okay? And it can combine concepts, attributes, and styles. So a lot of people have issues with this, as do I. And then you can expand compositions. It could go further than what's on the canvas to start with. And it makes realistic edits to existing images from a natural language caption. So again, it's text to image technology. This is new. So DALL-E 2 has learned the relationship between images and the text used to describe them. Okay, so this process is called diffusion. OpenAI introduced DALL-E in 2021, and a year later, DALL-E 2, which generates much more realistic and accurate images with 4 times greater resolution, came out. And it really was like an unbelievable jump in how well these things can improve over a very short period of time. Now, there are price plans for this, okay? So you do have to pay for it. And then the next thing that came out was Midjourney. So Midjourney came about publicly accessible in the summer of 2022. And you just write in the textual description of anything you can imagine. And in a few seconds, AI will generate 4 low-resolution images. And then you can fine-tune them and get hundreds or even thousands of variations of the outputs. You have a limited number of free images that you can make, and then there's a basic subscription. Now, what ended up coming out a little later was Stable Diffusion. They profess AI by the people, for the people, and Stable Diffusion is under the AI company of Stability AI. And they are working on a whole bunch of different things, okay? Not just, beautiful creativity solutions, but also education solutions under AI and medical solutions. I did a lot of listening to a lot of podcasts that Emad Mostaque, the founder and CEO of Stability AI, and he believes that people are essentially good. And at their core, they'll continue or they'll decide to do the right thing if they have the chance. So he made it open source. And I do believe that this is a very important development, because what he was trying to say was that if you only give it to big tech, when has big tech ever been interested in doing the right thing by humanity? Clearly they have not. Okay, big tech is all over social media, and those models are run essentially based on advertising principles and what your desires are and what your habits are, and they're only created so that it can change your habits, right? I mean, that's essentially what it's designed to do. So it's about manipulation. It's not about creativity or a larger, support of humanitarian development. So I understand that, yes, AI is dangerous, but giving it away so that everyone can use it at once is probably a better solution. Because if this is going to be an exponential leap, the last thing that we really want is for only certain people to be in charge of it, right? So this is his main take. Also, to put things in context, he was a hedge fund manager to begin with. And, he eventually took some time off from his career to pursue research in how AI might help his son who has autism. And he realized that all the research out there for autism was not really congregated in one central location where, you make some kind of conclusion based on overlapping research findings. So he was able to do that. And indeed, he was able to come up with a plan of action for his son to aid him in nutrition, in the drugs that he's using, all these different kinds of approaches. He also calls himself a person on the spectrum, and I don't really like to use a lot of this language, but him using it shows that, he considers himself somewhat Asperger's, okay, and ADHD. So listen, I get it. He's coming from a place where he wants to aid humanity, and also being from the original, his homeland of India, he's seen things that are
depictions of things that most Americans have not seen clearly. I mean, this is the bottom line. A lot of Americans have never seen any other country that is, say, that poor, and what they live in and what their infrastructure is, which is so lacking. Seeing how it's coming from a good place, I'm going to start there, okay, so that I can critique it. Because what's happening now on the internet is that there's a lot of controversy between non-artists and artists, between artists who are anti-AI and artists who are embracing AI. Not so much, it's not a war between them, but it's okay, get with it already, in the name of progress. That you better join in, or they're going to leave you behind. And, frankly, this is exactly what happened to the Native Americans and every other source of colonial expansion. Okay, I can't help but think that this is a sort of colonial expansion, like making it so that we progress, we progress. At what cost? Who is lost along the way? I've been following the AI movement for a long time, for years and years. And it's because I've had all these visions throughout my life. And again, take a look at my last episode. I discussed the beginnings of those visions, right? In literally 1994, when none of this was being discussed. So, yeah, I have seen what can unfold. And again, these are potentialities. But, after a while, things crystallize into form. There is no going back. AI is here, period. So we were on that trajectory. So it's crystallizing now. But it was going to crystallize anyway because we were on that trajectory and there was nobody changing it, right? So that even though it was a potentiality, nobody was going to throw in a wrench to break that inertia. It was going to continue down that road. So now that we're here, what else is going to just continue down that road? Well, it's exactly where we are. We are not looking to get off the AI highway. And as far as criticizing if that's a good thing or not, I have to tell you, I have not even touched the AI programs. I don't want to put my fingers inside them. And, this is coming from someone who is a fine artist who rejected commercial art as a career path, because I said I just want to do my art. I don't want to do it for someone else and then have an exchange of money so that it's like compromising my point of view and I'm just like doing the technical. Well, that's what a lot of these jobs are. These are skilled jobs with technical precision. And if you are no longer needed for such a thing, because these renderings are so beautiful. I mean, anyone can say, is it art? Is it not art? When I went to see Evan, for instance, I mentioned the AIart right away and how his presentation made me think about how we could potentially be losing the beauty and the sacredness of what art is for human beings forever. And he was just he grabbed his heart and he took a few steps back as though he was fainting and clutching, the heart attack that he was experiencing. He's like, oh no, AI art is not art. And this always boils down to what is art, right? What is art? I don't want to go in that direction because frankly, that's what many people always turn to whenever there's a new art movement. When there was the Renaissance, the movement afterwards bucked that at some point, right? And then, it became like, oh, where are you going with this? And there was a rejection of that until it was embraced. And then photography came along and people said, well, how can you just say that means art when you just push a mechanical button and you don't do anything beyond that? Well, then that became embraced when they saw that there was more technical skill to it, right? And that you needed a good eye behind that camera. And then graphic art was the same thing. I was one of the ones who rejected it. I said, I don't care about typeface and all that stuff. Those were early days and it was just like kind of layout for magazines. But I just was like, no, I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to do my own thing. And yet I have learned quite deeply to appreciate anything digitally art related because I understand that there's a process. I ended up learning how to use Photoshop and illustration and all of those programs, and I realized that there is a great deal of skill that goes into it. Do I want to continue to learn those skills? I basically use that stuff just for very basic ad work, for my podcast.
or maybe like fixing up some images if there's like an area of my body painting that's not, fully covered or something like that. But I don't use it for commercial jobs. I'm not called upon to do something on a graphically digital way and then give it to an employer. I've never been in that area. And yet my heart breaks for every single person who got a degree, especially recently, especially this newest generation that's entering the workforce. They just finished their graphic design degrees. What are they going to do? I mean, let's get real, people. What this is a replacement for workers. And again, I've been following this for years and years and years. What they, even up until this summer, in the big AI industry convention in Saudi Arabia this summer, they were talking about why is everybody rejecting this? Why is everybody rejecting the inevitable AI taking over the jobs? Because what that's going to mean is that all of these jobs that nobody wants to do anyway are going to be replaced. Well, exactly the opposite has happened. The jobs that people actually love doing are going to be replaced. And then it's so funny when I hear people like, well, artists toil over this stuff. And who wants to do that? And I'm thinking, you're not an artist. In fact, Emad Mostaque, the founder and CEO of Stability AI, he speaks like this. And one of the things he also says is that he can't even visualize an image in his head. He doesn't have that ability. So he is creating this wonderful creative experience for all those non-creatives out there. So let's get it real. Let's get real about it. We have to use language carefully. These are not tools for artists. No artist goes into a situation and says, oh, I just want to put a couple words into a program so that I could get the artwork out. And then that's all I have to do. Art is in our souls and it's in our fabric and it's something that we want to actually craft with our hands. A lot of artists, they get into other things that require, creativity with the hands. It could be cooking, it could be gardening, it could be any of those things. But you tend to find that people who like to work with their hands are these artistic types. That's part of our makeup. So one of the beautiful things about the revolution in digital artwork, with the jobs, the hundreds of thousands of jobs that it created with its explosion and the CGI movement that came along right afterwards, what it did was allow people who were artistic to actually get paid for their toils, right? For their labors. Because a lot of the times, let's face it, artists work, and this has been my experience. We work, we create the art, people may see it, they may love it. There's not that much exchange of money, There's just, you always have to do something else, whether you're teaching or, whatever, or you're doing graphic artwork, right? That kind of thing. So this was an opportunity for a whole class of creative people, for the first time, really, that we could get paid for our work and doing something that we love. And that was always something, and I say that to my students today still, follow your heart, follow your love, because things work out that way. But if we are so interested in taking that away for the sake of democratizing it so that everybody could do it, then really no one's an artist. If everybody could be an artist, then no one's really an artist, because it becomes common. It becomes something that is one of the easiest things you can do, and it loses its value. Now, on the other hand, with this loss of digital art and, workmanship behind it, the people who are fine artists, their value may go up, which is an interesting concept for me, because that's what I basically am. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I can sell my work now because it's human made, and believe me, I'm going to be writing human made on everything I make from now on. I mean, it's obvious if it's a painting, it's a painting, right? No robot has made it yet, but I'm sure that's going to be coming. I can't go into detail about how AI art works. It has a lot to do with steps in showing these AI systems billions of images and then introducing a lot of noise, and then there's a whole way that they teach and reteach and reintroduce these concepts to the AI systems, and then they just keep improving themselves. So I don't want to get into that. In fact, I will have in the show notes some good videos as to something that you could look at to get a little bit of a background on that because I think it's fascinating. But I don't want to get into something that I'm not an expert in this, okay? But I have an opinion because I'm an artist. And I think the most important thing right now is for us to get together and have this conversation, because it's not enough to just say, okay, I'm embracing it. We are being given an opportunity as the first class, within a capitalist society to be kind of X'd out overnight, job-wise. And once again, they kept saying it was going to be low-skilled labor, but the jobs that nobody wants to do, right? That's the robot jobs. That's like cleaning toilets and shit. They're getting rid of the creative jobs. They're getting rid of knowledge jobs, okay? Things that we enjoy doing. And the best is when I hear people say, well, now you can do other things. And I'm thinking, yeah, but this is what we want to do. Like, why are you taking jobs away that give us joy? Why are you doing that? Like, how is that benefiting society? Now, if you listen to Emad Mostaque talk about his stuff, and I'm going to have a few links also in the show notes, if anybody wants to listen to some decent interviews, he goes into a lot of really convincing and persuasive points of view as to why it's so important to make sure that everybody has this worldwide. Because these models can then be adapted locally. So you could have like the AIs of, a Swahili village, and they're focusing on the Swahili language. So it's properly optimized. It's not just colonial language, right? We've experienced this already, that a lot of the things that are on the internet come from like a white male perspective. So if you totally are able to give it to every area of the world and allow them to develop it as they wish, and again, he believes that people are essentially good in nature, then we might have a chance. We might have a chance to have some creative boom in humanity before the full AI takeover. But don't you deny in your heart your job is not at risk, because it's almost like you're living in the quiet before the storm, right? Because it's like you just want to benefit from the fun of it, the embracing of it. Oh, look what I could do now. But you don't realize that you're not needed anymore in this arrangement, okay? Because all of those jobs that corporate America were giving to you so that you could help them do their advertisements and their media, they needed you. They needed you to accomplish that. Now they could get rid of the middleman who costs a lot of money if they're highly skilled, and just bring in this program with some of the, like, anybody who isn't even in the arts. They don't have to pay for skilled labor anymore. It's a lot cheaper. Now, I'm going to also put another link in the show notes to a good video that I watched yesterday that talks about the monetization factor, how literally companies will be saving thousands of dollars. Okay, so this particular video is by Basement Picasso, okay? And it's called AIart, Biggest Advance or the Greatest Theft That Artists Will Ever See. And it certainly is a huge theft. Another great video that I am calling attention to is a video made by Steven Zapata. And you could check out his YouTube channel, Steven Zapata Art. And it got very popular, his video, and it got a lot of attention because it really does bring up a lot of good points of view regarding this. It got 500,000 views, and it's titled The End of Art, an Argument Against Image AIs. So you can check that out also in my description. Another video, which I think is really worth catching, it's called The War Between Artists and AI by Knows Best Never. And that's a great video as well because it really goes into, I would say, the entire debate. So you could see the history, you could see where these things are going. You can, he really talks about some of the problems with the arguments on either side. And certainly it really goes into the full controversy rather well.
What I found after I have gone through so many of these videos, these podcasts, listened to a lot of podcasts on it, too, audio podcasts, I have found that I would say it's pretty much like slashed down the middle, that a lot of people are really highly embracing this. And then a lot of people are like, screw this. This is like the end of everything. And I tend to lean on that side. I'm just going to be frank about it because I've seen visions. And that's where I go back to the narratives, of the Native Americans. I mean, there are so many stories that talk about how the Native Americans, they had their visions of the white man coming and taking over and, delivering their promise of progress. For who? Not for them, not for their people, for others. So I'm not sure who in the end is going to fully benefit. And I don't think the benefit's going to be a long one if it is a benefit. I will say I can't help but be intrigued. I have these chapters in my book that I always wanted to have a few artists work on animation for. And now, I can't help but feel like, oh, maybe I should just do the animation through AIart. Like, this is how sad it is. That's how easy it could be. You come up with each cell, say, of the artwork, and you have the animator, or you have the AI do it, and then you put it together, and then you have your story, right? That's how simple the movies are going to be. Like, anybody could create a movie soon, an animation movie. And they're doing it. They're already creating the comic books that are AI generated. I don't want to go in that direction. I want to say that if somebody does pick up my book and one day it gets produced, I want all of the artists who are humans to be working on this in a way that's never been done before. So, yeah, I want to throw that out there, but I don't have the money. I don't have the contract. Right? So, this does open up an area of creativity where people didn't have that previously. Just like the internet opened up the options to do really good research for people who didn't have access to university libraries, right? I mean, I still have trouble doing first source research sometimes because I can't get in certain university libraries online. I just, I pay for what I need to and I keep looking until I see that someone has somehow got it online, the articles that I need. But that's why I guess it's very important for it to be free and open source. But here's what I want to come back to. As an artist, as a person with an art degree, I've been through thousands of hours of art instruction and beyond, beyond my degree. But AI has been trained on billions of images, okay? And now AI can create. You don't need an artist anymore to do this work. You don't need an art director anymore to do this work. And I think the biggest illusion that I'm coming up against are the artists who embrace with the story that they're still needed. It's a sweet notion, It's temporary, though, because we see that only within this year, the incredible advancements that this has made are astronomical. Exponentials are something that allow for no prediction. I mean, we can say whatever we want, but I think the best prediction you're going to make with an exponential is suggesting something that's so wild and outside the park, it might just be right. For us to think that this is going to be a gradual turnover for jobs, eventually jobs will be created because other jobs will be lost, it's not going to be the case. When corporations are saving thousands of times the amount of money that they were putting out, what do you need an art director for? People could get good at just writing the prompts. It's an illusion that people think that the prompts will make the difference. If the AI gets better and better at recognition and what these things contain, mean, and convey, you couldn't just be straight out of college with no art abilities whatsoever and just the slightest bit of art appreciation. That's all that's needed. This is now being integrated at a scale to solve all the art problems of the future for commercial purposes. They are putting in all these AI engines into all of these Adobe programs like Photoshop. And eventually, yes, they need to do this now, right, in order to compete. But people who use Photoshop are actually artists. So this is just like a temporary transition so that they could still maintain relevance in the industry. Now, I'm not going to get into
the copyright laws. They are extremely complicated, and one of the biggest things that we have to keep in mind is that AI was not a thing before this recent explosion, right? So there are no laws regarding AI, and we know that. So just like the Napster experience, in the music industry years back when they had to deal with copyright laws and what was infringing upon the rights of musicians and what wasn't, we as artists have to connect and have a community and discuss this openly and demand what we think our value is before they just basically throw us under the bus. And that is part of the problem. They are basically harvesting all the creative minds of all the visually artistic humans so far and synthesized this into a program. Now, the music industry wouldn't allow something like this, okay? But the visual artists, they don't have an art industry to protect them. We are fundamentally on our own, all right? That's how it's always been with art. There is no doubt that these tools are stealing the market for people's future revenues, okay? And it's happening overnight. How is it reasonable to take everything immediately without asking? And us ordinary artists don't have the celebrity value to negotiate for ourselves, okay? This will fundamentally impact absolutely everything in areas of art. Comic art, storyboards, film for the future, stock photography for sure. We know that Shutterstock, for instance, is allowing all AI images to be sold in their catalogs, and Getty Images said no AI images for them. They banned AI images. So this is a very interesting thing because people do have to decide how they're going to adapt to this new reality. Okay, so the copyright issues are an issue because artists are saying, you are infringing upon my rights, you are stealing my style, it hurts my ability to work in the future if my style is devalued, and anybody could do it, right? People work their whole lives to create a style. But AI developers would say, well, if there's not enough data, then it can't perform as effectively or reliably. But why are we rushing? Why are we rushing? Would it take too much time to actually get artists involved to see if they want to opt in? No, it's like you have to opt out. And opting out is already a difficult procedure. You have to write emails to corporate people. They don't make it easy, okay? So it's a very interesting thing. We're entering this climate with no laws in place, with no other jobs in place, right? And if you talk to anybody about the AI movement, they're always saying, well, we have to go into a universal basic income. Well, that's fine. But who has established that? I mean, especially in America, you know how much that's going to be fought? A universal basic income? They're going to say, no, fuck you. No way. You're not getting a universal basic income. I don't know even how they're going to do that in a system, in a capitalistic system, because that screams the infrastructure of socialism. So the art industry is basically not in a position where these rights can be maintained centrally and managed like the music industry. So we need to unite somehow, and I don't know how it's going to happen, and it may not happen. Okay, it may not happen. So basically, AI has the ability to create, the ability to do work, and it holds a body of knowledge. Now, when you think about what a human feels good about, it's his purpose or joy in his own ability to create. And also his ability to work allows him to survive and provide sustenance for himself and his family. And the body of knowledge gives him sort of an ego or, a sense of connection, right? And a consciousness, really. It's like this, I'm aware of what I know, right? These things are changing as we speak, okay? And within weeks, it could be different. So I'm writing this at the end of January 2023, and who knows how different it's going to be within a month, okay? It could be within weeks these things turn around. But one thing is certain, time is changing, okay? Because the speed at which these things can do the work of a human being is astronomical. It is no longer
an issue. It will not take years for a movie to be made. It will not take weeks for a digital image to be rendered by an artist. It could be done in seconds. Now, when you eliminate time in that way drastically overnight there are consequences to this. And just to return to the beginning of what I was speaking about in this podcast, with going to see that Native American exhibit and, realizing what it means to perhaps progress too quickly without a full groups of people being ready for such a change. What it means permanent loss, and then what? Like apologies decades later, a quaint little, talk and an exhibit of some paintings a century after these tribes were wiped out. In the name of progress, this is what we're embracing. This to me is not just about art. It's about what AI means. Going back to Evan Pritchard, he had written a book called No Word for Time. And it's about the way of the Algonquin people and the language that they use. And he was an explorer of this language. And there is no word for time in the Mi'kmaq language, his background, nor in most Algonquin tongues. Grandfather Turtle would tell Evan, "There's no time in anything you do. When you're doing something, you do it till you finish it. That's how long it takes. There are no time limits. When it's finished, it's finished." And that's kind of like how art is, but no more. Evan states in his book, "Clocks have a beat that is heartless. They have no feelings. They are never tired. They don't respect we who do have such limitations. Many Native people learn various mental tricks to fit in with clock time, often learned later in life, but need to get away from clocks in order to be themselves." Well, I really believe that this is what era we're entering in. The clocks are the AI to me. The clocks are the capitalist clock with the money accumulating in the background, dollar by dollar as minute by minute goes by. That's all that's being tallied. And, if we are so interested in the sake of capitalism, that's what we determine progress is, like how much money corporations can make. What is this really? We're going to have to get away from the clocks in order to find ourselves. And hopefully by that point, the artists will come up with some new approaches to creating art and maybe take it back to the streets or take it back to the people. The art is for the people, right? So I'm going to have a part 2 with this and have a conversation on more in-depth analysis of some of these ideas. And it is hopefully the beginning of a long conversation that can be started by the people who know how to tell the stories, right? Either through visuals or through language or through music. And that is the artistic creative class. Don't give up on art. Don't give up on the creation process. The process, and this is what I always tell my students. What am I teaching a student who isn't that artistic? I'm teaching him about process. I'm teaching him about slowing down, creating, getting lost in the moment, not worrying so much, not thinking about anything, losing track of time, only concentrating on the strokes, the process, what you're doing. There is a joy in that I know personally that I lost that time when I was on antipsychotics. All I know is that my next painting, I am going to take my time to create it. And however long it takes, it takes.
Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.